Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. So a couple of days ago I bought this Mitsubishi Shogun and I advertised it and I was inundated with requests to do a video with it. So today I was actually planning on taking out a 5 Series GT, but I thought rather than disappoint both those viewers, I'd do a video with the Shogun instead. So here it is. It's a late 2010 Mitsubishi Shogun with a 3.2 litre turbo diesel and a 5-speed automatic gearbox. This is the top spec Diamond model, so it's got pretty much every extra you'd want. The Mitsubishi Shogun's been around since 1983 and it's cemented itself as a virtually unstoppable four-wheel drive. It's a very capable off-roader this. It's basically a slightly cheaper Land Cruiser. Now it's only known as the Shogun in the UK. In Japan and other markets it's called the PAJERO, and then in other markets it's called the Montero. And there is a reason for that. In Spain, PAJERO or PAJERO means wanker. So can you imagine that? Matt, what are you driving these days? Oh, I've got a long wheelbase blue over silver Mitsubishi wanker. Wouldn't really work, would it? Hence the Montero name. I would occasionally see PAJEROs when I lived in Spain, which would make me laugh because you're just basically driving around with a big wanker badge on your car. Anyway, the Shogun is a seriously competent off-roader. It's won the Paris-Dakar Rally as well as several others, so it does have proper off-road pedigree. I mean, it's obviously four-wheel drive, but it's switchable, so right now I'm in two-wheel drive. You can select it down here using this little gear selector. It's got a low ratio transfer box and lock-in diffs, so you'd like to think it would get you out of trouble. Having said that, it is a big heavy truck this. It's certainly not a Suzuki Jimny. If I put my foot down now as we join the bypass, now it's got 197 horsepower this car, which doesn't sound a lot, but there is plenty of grunt there. My parents always had Shoguns when I was a kid, and they do make a very good family car. There's 7 seats, so there's room for 7 people, or 5 adults and 2 kids. And there's also a boot even when the rear 2 seats are up, which is unusual. The rear 2 seats fold completely flat into the floor, so it doesn't impede the boot space. You've got the spare wheel bolted to the back door, so again it doesn't take up any space inside the car. And the fact that they've positioned the spare wheel slightly lower gives you good visibility. In fact, you'd never really know that you had a spare wheel mounted to the back at all. In the middle row of seats, you've got enough room for 3 car seats as well, which again is unusual. Quite often we'll have customers come in who have 3 car seats that need to fit in the middle row, and they don't want to drive a big people carrier, and this is perfect. Now this particular shaped Shogun has been around since the millennium, and although I still think it looks good, it is showing its age a little bit. They did a facelift in 2007 or 2008, where you got a slightly nicer grille, but it's basically the same shape. And you know, they've run it for nearly 20 years now, so I think it's time for an update. Now, if I was in charge of design at Mitsubishi, I personally would go back to the very first Mitsubishi for inspiration. I'd try and make it boxy, like a Jimny or a G-Wagon. Because I think there are so many four-wheel drives these days that are just curvy, forgettable blobs. So I think in order to stand out from the crowd, you really need something different. And I think that boxy, angular shape would look really cool. It would hark back to the first generation Shogun. And I mean, look at the Jimny, it's a really good looking car, as well as the G-Wagon. And there aren't any others, so anyway, if you're watching anybody at Mitsubishi, you can have that one. You can also buy a short wheelbase Shogun, which are a bit rarer because they're obviously less practical. Although they do make very good tow vehicles because they'll tow nearly 3.5 tons. So this is a 2010 model with a 3.2 litre turbo diesel. It produces 197 horsepower, which doesn't sound like an awful lot, but it's plenty, honestly. One downside is, I don't know if you can tell with this microphone or whatever, but I'm having to raise my voice to be heard because you do hear a little bit of engine noise, which is probably the only downside I've found so far, because the rest of the car is very good. To be honest, I've been driving this for a couple of days now with the radio on and I haven't noticed. It's only today, since I've been filming with the radio off, that I've noticed the slightly excessive engine noise. So if you're a librarian or a Buddhist monk and you like peace and quiet, probably don't buy a Mitsubishi Shogun. You get a 5-speed automatic gearbox, which is very smooth. Because you're sat up high, visibility is excellent. It makes you feel like the king of the road. The windscreen's steep and all the other windows are very big and tall, so there are virtually no blind spots. So it does make driving this big tank very easy. This model is the top of the line Diamond spec, so you've got every possible extra. And it's very luxurious in here actually. I quite like the layout. The layout's really sensible. Everything's where you'd expect it to be. Everything's easy to find. Everything feels well built and well made. And you do get lots of toys. I've got sat nav, which is a little bit dated actually. I've got a reversing camera, which is excellent. You get this premium Rockford and Fosgate audio system, which is honestly as good as any Harman Kardon system I've ever heard. It's also very easy to use. You can pair your phone to it in seconds, and you can play your music through your phone, through the speakers. It's also got the Bluetooth hands-free buttons down here. I've got cruise control. The only thing that I haven't got is automatic lights, which you would have thought would have been standard on a 2010 car. You get a big sunroof, and although this car is nearly 9 years old, there's hardly any wear on anything, and it's done 97,000 miles. It's obviously been well looked after, but it's a good testament to the car too. Also on the Diamond spec, you get the larger alloy wheels, which I think look great, and they don't ruin the ride. Usually bigger wheels just destroy the ride quality, but these don't. It still rides really well. It's a big comfortable car actually. The seats are very padded and thick. But yeah, the interior is very nice. You've got a couple of cup holders, you've got storage compartments, you've got storage compartments in the door pockets. You've got a big armrest here that's covered in leather, that's comfortable. I think after making the car for 35 years, they've just got everything just right. You'd expect to get in a car of this nature and expect the interior to feel very cheap, and this doesn't at all. You also get one-touch indicators, so you touch them and they come on for a lane change for 3 beeps. I do think it looks great in white as well. You get the bigger wheels, I've got privacy glass, I just think it looks good. Saying that, passers-by probably think I work for the highways agency. In terms of what it's like to drive, it feels like an old school 4-wheel drive. It doesn't feel like a Porsche Cayenne. There's a little bit of body roll, but honestly it's not too bad. You can hear the engine, and you do hear a bit of road noise, whether that's through the tyres or the 4-wheel drive system, I don't know, but you can hear a bit of road noise. Lucky then that you've got the Rockford and Fosgate audio system to drown it out with. Even though this is the top spec, best that money can buy model, it does still feel a little bit utilitarian, which isn't a bad thing. I think that's what most people that buy these kind of things want. They don't want to buy a Range Rover where they're frightened to use it for work or worried about damaging the ivory interior. They want a workhorse, and that's what this is. They want to be able to rough it up a little bit, and I think that's what the Shogun's designed for. Running costs can be quite high. The earlier models fell into that high tax bracket of £570 a year. This one doesn't actually. The 2010 onwards is only £325 a year, which is easier to stomach. And fuel-wise, I've been averaging 25.7 miles per gallon, which I think is acceptable on a car of this size. They've also got quite a big fuel tank, so it'll cost you over £100 to fill it up here in the UK. But you'll get maybe 600 miles out of that tank. There are some common issues with the Shogun. Usually when I buy them, I have to spend about £1,000 on them doing various bits and pieces. Thankfully this one's a good one. Someone's looked after this one and done all these issues that I'm about to tell you. So quite often the air conditioning fails, and that can be quite an expensive job because the compressor needs replacing and the parts are quite expensive for that. So you need to factor in about £400 or £500 if that doesn't work. Check there's plenty of life left in the tyres too, because the tyres aren't cheap. So that's another thing to look for. And they do wear the tyres quite quickly, so it's probably best going for a better brand because it will save you money in the long run. Check the rear wheel arches for rust. On this model they've just started to go, so I'll have to get those painted. Not too bad, but just a little bit of surface rust. But I've seen them in the past where they're just completely rotten. So yeah, open the back doors, have a proper dig around it, and just check they're not completely rotten. Now also, as a matter of course, any 4-wheel drive that I get, I always have it undersealed, because here in England they salt the roads and we get bad winters. So cars just don't last as long as they would in Spain or California. So I would have yours wax oiled if you're thinking of buying one. It'll just protect it. Also the early models, I've had a couple of Shoguns now with leaky fuel tanks because they've rotted away. So again, get it all wax oiled. Do that every few years and you should be fine. The driver's seat bolster on the models with leather always rips. Because it's so high to get in and out, it takes more strain. Again, on this one it hasn't, which is surprising. Also the diesel models do have a DPF, a diesel particulate filter, which can clog up. So make sure every couple of weeks you take it for a good blast on the motorway just to clean it all out. If you're just pottering around town, it will get clogged up. And a new one's quite expensive. Factor in about £1,000 for a new one of those. Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but make sure you get your gearbox serviced. The automatic gearbox needs its fluid changing every 80,000 miles, so make sure that's been done. I can't believe the number of people who don't have that done, and for the sake of 150 quid, it would save you £2 when the gearbox goes. You can pick up Shoguns in the UK for under £5, but like anything, I wouldn't recommend going for the cheapest one you could find. I'd try and find the best one, not the cheapest. I don't like to sell the cheapest of anything because when you buy the cheapest, you'll end up spending more money on it in repairs. So try and buy the best you can afford. Bit of consumer advice there, I feel like Martin Lewis. A couple of alternatives to the Shogun. You could buy a Discovery 3 or 4, but that all comes down to personal preference. You could buy a Land Cruiser instead of a Shogun, but generally they're about 20% more expensive than the Shogun. And I don't think that's good value for money, but each to their own. On the whole though, they are very reliable cars, and quite often the owners will replace them with a newer model, which is a good sign. They also hold the money quite well. If you look after it, it will keep its value. So for a nice Shogun, expect to spend about £10. For a nice newer low mileage one, similar to this, perhaps up to 15, you'll get a good one. This kind of car is a dying breed. Most four-wheel drives these days aren't serious off-roaders, they're just school-run cars. This is one of the few true off-roaders that's still out there that you can still buy. It drives well, it's practical, and it won't break the bank. So thank you once again for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. If you've got any questions, leave them below in the comments, and I'll do my best to get back to you. So I'll see you next time. Cheers, guys.